Well, good afternoon. This is number 404, and based upon the couple of seconds of conversations I've just had with a couple of people, this is probably an instrumental seminar because I know at least one person in the room who started collecting quite a while ago and only started inventorying what the person had recently. He's now hiding in his basement on a regular basis trying to organize himself. And so for Terry Shaffer to come along and do a seminar for us on organizing your collection is just like quintessentially important because everybody kind of needs to know what they have. We have a couple of small rules. The first one is if you own a cell phone or a BlackBerry or one of these guys, put it on beep or turn it off. It would be really cool. The second thing is that we'd prefer if you hold your questions until our presenter has had an opportunity to finish. Our experience has been occasionally that the question becomes a conversation, the conversation becomes two-way between two people, and before you know it, everybody in the room's going, when is he going to finish with his presentation? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Terry Shaffer. It's taken me a while to get him up here to do this, and a while to catch up with him on occasion, but I think we're going to really enjoy this. Terry, they're all yours.
Okay, first off, thanks, Sheldon. I wanted to start off just by saying that being organized, in my opinion, is one of the most important things in collecting, period. If you don't know what you have, it just leads to one problem after another, whether it be buying the same chip or token or silver strike again and again. I did it myself. And it didn't take me too long to realize that I had an awful lot of really good traders. And it was because I bought the same chip. I knew I needed the chip. I just didn't remember if I had bought it or I'd seen it was too much money and I didn't buy it or I wanted to buy it. And after a while, the wants and the haves start to blend together. Can we get the slide? Categories of organization, I think, are the physical location of the items. What are you doing with the actual item? And the documentation of the items. In other words, how are you going to deal with that? Are you going to put it in a digital format? Okay, slide. For physical storage, we have binders, flip boxes, airtights, safe, wall displays. It's what are you doing with it? Where is the location of that? The bottom one I call the Shaffer technique, and that's keep your favorite chips under your pillow, close to you. Slide. Three-ring binders are the most common ways. There's a lot of different types of binders. There's the zipper type if you're going to go and move your chips around place to place. The problems you can see with these are that we have slips in the tops and they can fall out. Depending on the type of the actual page, they're different sizes. Depending on the kind of chip, whether it's an oversized chip, a standard chip, the mold of the chip, they come in different sizes, whether it's a 39 millimeter, 38 millimeter, or 40. The last thing you want is to have your chips fall out as you're going from one place to another. And I think most of us that have used these have had that happen. The Dansko binders are great, except the one thing I don't like about them is that it doesn't have any place to write information. I use these for my high-end chips. I also keep them in a safe. The rest of the non-primo chips go in a bunch of various different places, and I'll show you a few. I like displays. I think if you have chips and you really enjoy them, put them out where people can enjoy them. I have them on my walls. I'll show some others. These are other collectors. The important thing about having your chips or strikes in a frame is knowing what you have. Don't forget that you have that. So make sure that you inventory what's there. And we'll touch base with that when I deal about the digital documentation. Again, do you know what is there? Where is it? Best thing, slide. Another beautiful collection, but we need documentation. Now, you're not going to have it documented on the wall, although you could if you have some high-end chips. But remember, when you do things like this, you want to keep them out of the sun. Storage containers. If you're going to use storage containers, make sure you mark on the front what it is, because they start accumulating. Keep them organized within the container, whether you have Midwest or you have California, just whether you write on the box or on the binder, slide, put where it's from. And it's easy and quick to go and find what you're looking for. The last thing you want to do is go box after box after box trying to find something. You know you have it, you just don't know where it is. This is a collector's way of storing his collection. He's using boxes, and inside are flips. Slide. Here's it open, and you can see he's labeled the top of each flip with the information, the TCR number. I can't read from here exactly what else he has. But flips and boxes are a very popular way. Slide. Flips and binders. Great. This one here has a 2x2 flip behind the actual chip. And the reason it's done this way is because it's not an extra sheet of plastic between the plastic of the binder and the chip. So it makes it a little clearer and cleaner to look at, and it also keeps the chip from sliding out. You can also price it that way. Here's another group of boxes, putting airtights in boxes, but you have to know what's in there. This is great if you're selling chips and you can put all the Nevadas in here, but from here you don't really know what's inside the box. Specialty binders like casino chip binders, this particular one is not available any longer, but there are a number of different types that are like that. And the inside of that, on this one, there's a piece of paper behind each chip, slide, showing exactly what the chip is, the TCR number, the value. When you're putting the values on there, I wanted to make a special note here. Make sure you put the year of the value. Now on these it says 04. Just having the value on there, unless you're going to go back each time, you won't know what year was that value from. If this chip came out in mass, you don't know if this was before the big mass came out or after. So if it's a Q value chip and suddenly the market is flooded with them and it drops down to a G value chip, you can't go by that first one. So putting the year of the value is, I find, very important. This is the pool table storage method. This particular collector, these were his traders. And the slide really doesn't do any justice to the sight that was to behold. This is an 8-foot pool table. He had no idea what chip was where. He remembered some of what he had, and I was interested in it. And he said, help me look for it. Needless to say, I didn't get that chip. Another pool table storage method. Slide. Physical storage conditions. You don't want to have a valuable chip in your collection stored right next to a very cheap chip. And in a minute I'll show you why. Another consideration is the security of that particular chip. The last thing you'd want to have happen is have a display board with no glass and that chip falls out and it's a chip from the early 50s and it's just shattered on your floor. Are these traders versus collection? I met up with a newer collector who he brought over to my house his box of chips that were in a cookie tin. And he was going to trade with me. I happened to find him on Craigslist. And I said, okay, let's see what you have. We started looking through it, and I found some chips. And he said, oh, no, those are for my collection. Well, why are you showing them to me? Well, they're mixed in. These are the traders. Okay, these are the collectors. Okay, so we just organized them. So you want to keep them separate. Easy access if you need to get to your traders or sale chips, or if you want to just play with them. The last thing I would want to do is have my collection so locked up tight that I can't enjoy it. I'm a physical hands-on guy. I take my chips, the ones that had the binders that say casino chip binders. Those of you that visit thechipboard.com have seen my posts looking for more of these. That's what I use for my personal collection, and I have a closet that I've just filled with shelves. And I'll just take a book out randomly. I won't even look at what it is. I'll pull a book out, and I'll go out on my deck, and I'll just leaf through it. And I am just happy as a clam. Easy transportation was another one. That's okay. Let's go to the next slide. Here's a good example of just keeping chips separate. The chip on the left versus the chip on the right are a little different, even though they're both from the sands. Not quite the same value, and really should keep the more valuable chip in a separate area like the Dansko binder or airtights. You want to keep them protected, and you don't want to risk. Digital documentation. Computers, I think, are a blessing. Even this computer up here. Don't you love the ship steering wheel? I think that's Dwight Eisenhower. If it's not, it does look like it. Okay, slide. There are a lot of different ways to keep digital track of your chips. Databases, spreadsheets, word processors. Online, there's the collector's library where you can track your chips online if you don't want to play with your own software. Poor alternatives are highlighting price guides. Fine and dandy until the next price guide comes out. Then you've got to go back and forth, and invariably the price guides are going to get finer and finer print, smaller and smaller. And never assume you remember everything you have. It's just not going to happen. I'm going to go through a couple of different methods, starting with spreadsheets. They have full ability to have detailed information like the casino name, the city, the state, the ID, the value, the year, whatever you want. You can set up a spreadsheet to have columns of whatever field that you want to track. Unfortunately, it's a really small file size, and the data can be, wait a second here. You can have, this is the pros, you have the information can be stored easily, small file sizes. It's easy to email a spreadsheet to someone, and like Excel is very common. It's part of the Windows package. And most everyone can open that and see it, whereas a database you could not unless they have that database. And it's fairly inexpensive. Next slide. The problem with it is that you have a lot of restrictions. There's limited sorting, there's limited searching, you can't have the pictures in it, there's limitation to your reports. The printing is really a disaster with that, and you have no control over how you're going to present it. You can't control the look and the feel, and you really want to be able to have a report that pleases you, whether you want pictures on it, whether you want to have particular fields on it. Here's an example of a Excel spreadsheet. Across the top you see A, B, C, D, E, F. Those are your columns. And going from top to bottom would be the line items. Those would be your individual items of your collection. Okay, slide. Then we come to databases. Databases come in a lot of different styles. You can custom as you please. Pre-made databases may give you full control, or they may be restricted, so what you have is what you get. You can't change it. This particular one is the collector's assistant. It does give you total control. This is the way I have my collection set up. You can have this both sides of the chip, various fields for item details. I don't know. Can you read the details from where you are out there? Can you, or is it a little blurry? Okay. We'll move to the next slide. The pros are, it's really the most extensive and versatile way of digital documentation. You can have scans and pictures, numerous pictures, not just one or two. Data can be exported for other use. You can control what kind of informational fields you have. If there's one thing specifically that you like, whether it's a butterfly chip or a cowboy silver strike, you can create your own field, and anything that you want to sort by, you can create a field by. And you have an extensive report capability. And that to me is very, very important. I want to be able to control my reports. Unfortunately, it can take time to create these. If you're not buying one that's pre-made already, it's trying to reinvent the wheel. Number 2, Collector's Assistant is the best darn database program in the entire civilized world. We'll hook up. But it is not easily emailed. You have to save it in a different format and then email it. So if you want to share my trader list with someone else and say, can you just email me what you got, or email me a copy of your collection, you would have to either save it as a PDF file or as a tab delimited file. So you can save it then into Excel, but you would have to change it from the format that you're in now. Here's another example of the database. One more shameless plug. This is Collector's Assistant Plus, the best darn database program in the entire civilized world. Slide. With databases, it's very easy to control the look and the feel. You can change the picture size. You can change what fields you have, where you put them. This particular one is for playing cards. Slide. Another example for slot cards. Slide. The reports, you can pick and choose which field, informational field, you're going to put on there. You don't have to have everything. Again, that's the difference between a full database program and one that's restricted. You have various formats you can save in. For instance, if you want to go in Excel or tab delimited, you have a lot of control over what is printed and how the printing layout is. Slide. Here's an example of how I do my printouts. Before every show, I print my collection out. This is an example of one page. I put a picture of the chip, the name of the casino, the location, the city location, the state, the TCR number, the value, and the year. When I print my book out, I don't ever buy the same chip that I have. Once I started doing this, and it's been a number of years now, excuse me, I haven't bought the same chip again. The price of the database was small compared to what I was spending on duplicate chips. And it wasn't just because I'm old. Young collectors are doing it. As people I've spoken to, and let me just ask an open question. How many of you done that? Bought the chip you already had? I bet that's got to be 75% of the audience. That's a perfect reason why you should, in some way, it doesn't have to be a database, it doesn't have to be the one that I handle. You can do it in a lot of different ways, but you should have documentation that you take to a show. Don't go to a show without it. Don't go to a show without a price guide, and don't go without knowing what you have. Slide. Report types are, it could be a simple text list. You don't have to have pictures. If you just want to have the TCR number and say, I have this. With a database, you can always have a listing grid where there's the text only. 2D pictures with fields. That's an example I just showed you on the last slide, was a two-dimensional. You have control over how many per page. That page, can we back up one? This one has 4 by 5. So there's 20 scans on each page. You could have as little as 4. You could have 1 if you really have a high end, and some collectors do. They have a printout, and you'll see they have just 1 chip on each page. And that's the really high end chips. Some will have 4, some 8. This one just happens to have 20. I can see, and it's close to actual size when you do 20 on a page. Okay, slide. And one more. This is an example of one of our collectors, makes a cute little cover for it. It's spiral bound, and he goes to every chip show. He prints out his collection before he goes. I don't know, have a lot of you seen different collectors walking around with spiral bound notebooks with their collections with chips like that? Yes. Slide. We've come a long way. Slide. This is a very important slide right here. No matter which digital form you pick, you have to remember you must get started with it. You've got to get started. That's the first step. Okay, slide. With digital and computers comes all the things that go bump in the night, whether it be floods, lightning strikes. Slide. Every hard drive will fail. Maybe today, it may be tomorrow or 2 weeks. It's just the perfect situation. You have to appreciate that. You of all people have to appreciate the gamble that we take every single day, not knowing when that hard drive is going to go. It could be from power surges or a computer virus, floods, fire. Slide. So if you are prepared, you won't have to worry about something unforeseen happening. Isn't that precious? Slide. I want to go over a few other details on why we should do documentation of our collections. That's Edward G. Robinson. Slide. Estate planning. What's going to happen when that lightning strikes and God finally says, your chip collecting days are over? Someone's going to have to deal with our collections, whether it be tokens or stamps or our old TV guides. Someone has to deal with what we're leaving behind. And we should have control before we get to that situation. Let's leave some sort of documentation for estate planning. Who should take care of that? Do you want that chip to be sold, or should it be an heirloom? Was this, you want this to go one of each to your children. Why? Because your mother and I, that's the first place we went, kids. We want you to save this chip, and I want you to pass it on. Or if you have an entire collection and you want someone to handle that, it may be the collector knows and the wife doesn't, or vice versa. Who would be best to handle the disposition of that collection now that the owner of the collection is gone? In other words, who's going to cheat her the least? Slide. Should we sell it all? If so, by whom? Should some be a family heirloom? Who gets what? Is anything donated to the club? Another good reason to write things down. What's the value of these items? The other person isn't going to know what you've got. So if you're documenting your TCR number or the California number, why not document the value and if you want that chip to go somewhere when you're gone? Or do you want it to be sold? Slide. Insurance. There's a good example of what can happen when you least expect it. Now, you're not going to get full value from your insurance. So if you have documentation, don't leave it in the house where the documentation goes up in flames as well as the particular. Do a backup. So when you do a backup, in case there's going to be a lightning strike or a power surge or a flood, use an external hard drive and take that some other location, whether it be an office or your kid's house, or if you've got a safety deposit, just throw it somewhere else where it's safe and sound, that if something does happen, you can say, what did I have in that pile of ashes? Prudential, here's what I had. Okay, slide. You don't know what's going to happen. Things that go bump in the night. Slide. Another reason for documentation is the education that you get. When I started putting together my database and I started logging my collection, I put in there the years that the casinos opened and closed. I put in there whether the chip was obsolete or not. I couldn't believe how much I didn't know. It wasn't until I started putting information in that I realized that I was basically really ignorant in the field. I didn't know what casinos open want. Some people have the sequence of the properties as they've turned over. So it all starts to stick with you. Maybe not all the pieces of information stick with you, but when you see things over and over again, even when you're reviewing your collection, you're going to see those little items, these pieces of information, and it starts to stay with you. You get educated, whether you like it or not. The ownership is another thing. Once I started getting into it, I started realizing, well, geez, this was owned by Yo, and this was owned by Yo, and okay, slide. A few do's and don'ts. Don't stick a knife into the socket. Okay? Get started. Again, I mentioned that earlier. You just have to start doing it. If you have 10,000 items and you spend 5 minutes a day, before you know it, it'll get done. Baby steps. Think about why you're doing it so you know what you want to have on there. So think it out before you start doing it. Write a little outline. What things do I want to keep track of? What things would I want to sort by? Do I want to be able to sort by denomination? Do I want to sort by how many inserts? You can get crazy with the information you put. Some people put rim markings on. I don't. Just put plenty of details on there that you would think are important. Slide. Don't put it off. Get started. Don't think of it as too large of a task, and don't be afraid to ask for assistance. There may be someone in your household that has no interest in your collection, but will be more than happy to help you enter things. And don't be afraid to purchase a pre-made specialty program. No. I've heard they exist, though. Slide. Organized collectors are happy collectors. Okay, that's my presentation. Do we have any questions? Thank you. In the back?
A couple of things. First of all, gaming is going to start using your software, is what I hear, correct?
Correct.
And also, when you store chips in these pages, plastic pages, have you run into any bleeds on them things yet?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But what I haven't seen is any damage to the chip. Now, whether in 30 years, obviously if there's color going into the page, there's color coming out of the chip. But I can't tell the difference. I've had a chip that was just stored there in Trader Book and it's been sitting there for years and years, and there's a red circle. Red seems to be the one color that bleeds the most. But looking at the chip that I've taken out, I just can't see any difference. But yes, there is bleeding.
Are they all chip holes, basically? Or is it
No, I've seen a few others. I haven't seen any Bud Jones bleed. I have seen some Paulsons bleed.
I lost one chip in my collection, and I had it in plastic, those binders, and evidently got too hot. It melted onto the,
Oh, no kidding.
yeah. I mean, this is one out, and it's just unbelievable. One page, one chip out of the whole day, one book. I tried to pull it out.
Well, I have one piece of advice for you. If you're in Vegas, don't put your collection on the windshield.
I lost one chip there.
That's a very good point. Sam?
couple of questions? What was the name of that program again?
Collector's Assistant Plus. The best darn database program in the entire civilized world.
Is it available here?
Yes, it is. It's available in the exhibit hall. Thank you.
They gave me updates on that because I have the plus, but my problem with that particular system is I can't find, I mean, I can put things in there and it says there's a search engine, but I can't search. It's there. It says search, and you put it in there, and I can't, it doesn't go to where it's supposed to.
I'd be happy, come by the table. I'd be happy to show you how to do that. And you can store quick searches, so you can search. Most databases will allow you to do multiple searches at once that are multiple levels, and you can save that particular search if you want to do a search. Let's say you do denominational search over and over again, whatever your favorites are, or maybe by you just want to see all your hard rock chips. So you can do a search and then save that, and easy to come up. Usually the problem is that when you're putting different variables in, Either you're not putting it as equal to, or if you are using a lowercase rather than a capital, then your search won't go through. It has to be exactly what's listed in the database, otherwise it won't find the record. Other questions?
What program do you use for the online inventory?
I don't know what the base program is for that. It's called Collector's Library, and I believe Brian Watts is doing that. Is that correct? Jay, do you know who's handling that now? Still Brian.
I didn't get to my question. Questions. Can photos be, in that program, can photos be added after you added the descriptions and then go back later and add the photos?
Yes, you can add, you can change, you can switch them around, you can, yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then, you were talking about archiving it. So if you archive it on a flash drive, whatever you archive it on, when you open it up on another computer, does that computer have to have the software, or can it be saved as a PDF file?
Yes.
Put it on the flash drive. The whole thing on the
If-
flash drive.
That's not my question.
You can save it as a PDF file, yes, and if you're going to try to open the database as a database and work in it, you would have to have the program. For instance, if you save a Word file, or if I email you a Word file, if you don't have the program Word on your computer, you won't be able to open it.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
It's exactly the same whether it be a spreadsheet or a database.
It's a PDF, so that's not the problem.
But you won't be able to open the PDF if you don't have Adobe. So it's exactly the same thing. You have to, whatever the format,
You can download Adobe easily.
it's a free program, but still, if you don't have that program. So any file type, you have to have a method of opening that file type. So if the file type is specific to that particular program, like PDF is to Adobe, you have to have Adobe. Now, for most of the programs, you can save in various formats. You can save as a tab delimited file. For instance, with Excel, if you save as a tab delimited file, you can open it up in various things. All the tab delimited means is that the difference between each field is specified by a tab. Now, for Excel, it would be each column. So that when you want to import something, for instance, into a database, you would then be asked and prompted by the computer to connect this particular column to this particular field. And it'll run down the list of fields, so you have to say that column A, which is maybe you called city, that you want this column A, that's city, to be connected to the field called city. And then I'll go on to the next one sequentially from A, B, C, D, E, F, all the way across your Excel spreadsheet. So in a matter of minutes, you can then import into a database, and my database as well as any others, each column, and then it will be in the right field and in the right place.
With your new software that you've got, I'm trying to decide if I want to go get myself a crackberry or not. Will you have a form on this that I could download?
Well, it's a function of the particular items. Now, PDF is really the most versatile way of viewing things. It's a very relatively small file size. It can be viewed in just about any location. I have an iPhone. I view my PDFs. Each of those pages, maybe you want to save the letter A as a PDF. So you would have my collection A, and then it's a small file. Depending on what type of smartphone you have, they will pretty much all handle PDFs, and you can just review your collection that way. As far as a particular database, it's such a big program that it takes up a lot of space, and smartphones aren't yet pocket computers. Although they're having these netbooks now that are just absolutely amazing. I saw a number of people at the show that had netbooks and were walking around and they had their entire collection on a netbook. That's probably one of the best things that a person can